with Enterprise as the guest of honor.
And that was a great celebration. She welcomed over 200,000 visitors to the ship for a week. And then they had the big parade down Avenue of the Americas. And the Enterprise Navy Band was selected to lead that parade.
Thousands of curious onlookers come aboard the legendary ship, there to read her posted scorecard. 20 service stars, one for every major battle. 911 aircraft destroyed, 71 ships sunk. The most successful and the most decorated ship up to that point in the history of the U.S. Navy. In May 1946, a year after the war is over, Enterprise is back in dry dock and in limbo. The U.S. Navy looks to the future, and the future is jets. In fact, some of the first experimental jet fighters flew combat missions in World War II. Yet the Big E's decks and structure are not large enough or strong enough to support jet warfare. She is an honored warrior whose wars are behind her. The question remains, what to do with her? The U.S. Secretary of the Navy suggests that Enterprise become a floating museum, calling her the one vessel that best symbolizes the Navy in the war. Admiral Bull Halsey leads an effort to raise money for an Enterprise museum, but it is not to be. The Big E, greatest warrior of the Pacific, is finally sold for scrap.
They couldn't save it. To sold for scrap, that hurt. I cried.
Underway for the last time, the USS Enterprise moves from Brooklyn Navy Yard to Kearny, New Jersey, and the wreckers. Thus is marked the failure of Admiral Bull Halsey's campaign to have the Big E preserved as a national shrine. Obsolete in the jet and atomic age, the one vessel that most nearly symbolized the role of the Navy in the Pacific War heads meekly for the scrap heap.
Enterprise veteran Edward Suto watches the progress of the destruction over many months as he goes to work every day at the Ford factory in New Jersey.
I was watching dismantling piecemeal, and I was watching clear down to the hull where they had everything cut away except just the bottom part of the ship. It's heartaching.
To some veterans of Enterprise, the process is a crime. To others, it is a sad inevitability.
I've seen what goes on these sideshow ships, and I don't like it. It's, kids running about and screaming, selling of candy and ice cream and so on, and it all seems to me just degrading. I always felt that the Enterprise was something truly noble, a great ship, and I didn't want to see her tied up.
And some say the scrapping of the Enterprise is a testimony to her own success.
At the end of World War II, this country got down to the business of being in peace. That we literally beat our swords into plowshares at the end of the Second World War. That really says a lot about our history. So we may not have the USS Enterprise today that we can go visit as a floating museum. But I think even that in and of itself illustrates the transition that occurred in this country.
Enterprise may be gone, but her memories live on.
I still love USS Enterprise CB-6. I think the Enterprise still has a personality today. It's, of course, gone to the scrap heap many years ago, but it's still living on in the hearts and minds of so many of us folks that are still living today.
Some of her valiant warriors carry a piece of Enterprise in their hearts. Some carry a piece of Enterprise elsewhere.
I still got a bag full of small pieces of shrapnel. That's my part of the Enterprise. That'll carry me all the rest of my life. Every time I get a chest x-ray, it lights up.
Many of the men of Enterprise remained in the military. Norman Dusty Cleese, one of the heroes of Midway, went on to a long Navy career, retiring as captain. Fighter pilot Donald Flash Gordon attained the rank of captain. James Jig Dog Ramage served in Korea and Vietnam and retired as a rear admiral. And Vincent Dupois of Fighting Squadron 6 attained the rank of rear admiral, and in 1961 became the first captain of the new Enterprise, America's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. And even now, more than 60 years later, stories of valor from the Enterprise are still coming to light. At a reunion of Enterprise veterans in 2001, Walter Kyle finally revealed the true story of what happened on the Enterprise's last day of action, a tale he had kept secret for 6 decades.
We were sitting around talking about things that happened, instances and so forth, and I or somebody said, "Walter, boy, you were lucky," and Walter, for the first time, started talking about this thing.
May 14th, 1945. Walter Kyle scrambles onto floating wreckage after Enterprise has been hit, where he finds 2 soaked sailors.
One of them said, there's another guy, third guy, he said, bring him over. And he said, can't. And of course I asked why. The guy said, it's hurt.
Kyle swims to the rescue of the wounded man, Bob Riesland, while the floating wreckage drifts away.
So the guy said, I'm wounded, I'm going to die anyway, so just go ahead and get back onto the elevator and leave me drown. And he wouldn't do that.
Kyle refuses to leave the wounded sailor, staying with him for hours until they are finally rescued by a destroyer. Kyle returns to Enterprise the next day, more interested in a hot shower and hot meal than a medal. The wounded sailor recovers in Enterprise's sickbay, and Kyle tells no one about his own heroism.
He never said anything about the sailor, he just said he'd been going overboard, and that's all he said.
We sat there enthralled and astonished to learn what had transpired. We said, Walter, we never heard that story.
Kyle's shipmates soon had a surprise in store.
We went to the Marine Corps, and I think I was the only officer left at that time. So I applied for a medal.
On May 15th, 2004, Walter Kyle is called down to the field during a game at Miller Stadium in Milwaukee and receives the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for his heroic self-sacrifice 6 decades earlier. No one was more surprised than Walter Kyle.
I thought that it was done and it was over with in its history. Because you remember, it was 59 years had passed. And it never occurred to me that they'd do anything.
Enterprise's spirit lives on. The story of USS Enterprise is the story of World War II. From her actions during the first attack on Pearl Harbor, to the final battle of the Pacific at Okinawa.
This ship was there for everything.
But Enterprise's heroic actions were simply a reflection of the heroes who sailed her. The last of a generation who literally saved our nation by risking everything.
I didn't see any glamour in it at all. All I saw was a lot of destruction, a lot of bad things. There's nothing glamorous about war. But this country's worth fighting for. That's why we do it.
A lot of people come up to me now and say, thank you for what you've done. Thank you.
You know, if it wasn't for those guys, we wouldn't be here. We climbed on the backs of their sacrifice. Their history is my tradition. And without the sacrifices that they made, I wouldn't even be here to fight.
USS Enterprise was one of the greatest weapons in the arsenal of democracy. A fierce and deadly machine whose purpose was to win a devastating war. But to her men, the Big E was less of a weapon than a home.
It was like a big mother hen or something to me. You know, you'd go out on 300-mile searches and come back and here's a little beacon flickering and you'd home in on that beacon and get back aboard. You know, it just our home was taking care of us.
Enterprise may disappear, and her men may die, but she is still one of the most decorated, most valiant, and fightingest ships in U.S. history. An Enterprise and her band of brothers will remain as beacons of valor, sacrifice, and grit, as long as her tales are told, as long as there are Americans who remember.